Welcome into the PFF Free Agency Update powered by PFF Elite. Sam, today it's all about Kirk Cousins reportedly signing with the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to give him 3 years, $28 million guaranteed. That's what's being reported as of today. But more importantly, how does this fit? How does this work for the Minnesota Vikings? Are they getting better today?
This is a really fascinating deal. It's been the one that's been reported all the way through the lead up to free agency. I never really bought it because I was expecting this Cousins leverage, the best quarterback available on the market, at least with Drew Brees being that caveat, to push that contract into stratospheric levels of money. 30 million plus a season, 6-year deal, the kind of huge contract that would just reset the market. But instead, what's happened is he's used that leverage to go the other way and say, okay, I'll keep the dollar figures the same, but I want it 100% guaranteed, and I want it for just 3 years, so that he's going to go hit the open market again in 3 years' time and get another payday. So for him, it works out perfectly. He gets a fully guaranteed deal, which has the potential to change the marketplace. One of the aspects of NFL contracts is they're not fully guaranteed the way NBA contracts are. So he has the potential to change that with this deal. And for the Vikings, it keeps the deal relatively affordable for them. They were one of the few teams that could go hard after Kirk Cousins. They had the 8th most salary cap space heading into free agency, $44.5 million there or thereabouts. They don't have to go $30+ million a season, which will squeeze that roster for the next few years. They can keep it as an affordable deal, only a little bit more than they're paying the 3 QBs that were on the roster this year, and still build the rest of that team to chase a Super Bowl.
Yeah, there's some players already taking to Twitter calling Kirk Cousins a hero for his ability to maybe maximize his value, being franchised a couple times, not really giving into that long-term deal with Washington, and now making out in the open market. And then, like you said, hitting the open market again in 3 years. I think now when we discuss this deal, when it comes to the Vikings' perspective, Kirk Cousins has only graded as a top 10 quarterback once in the PFF era. He's got 3 full years as a starter. He finished 14th in 2015, 9th in 2016, and then 19th last year, his worst season as a starter. What do you make of Cousins? Because I feel like there's a big part of his game that is very dependent on those around him, because in all of those top seasons, he's looked good statistically. So the raw stats, the passer rating, the yards per attempt are all looking good. PFF grades are a little bit lower. That's usually an indication that his supporting cast has really helped him along the way.
Yeah, it's important to understand what Kirk Cousins is and what he isn't. He is not an Aaron Rodgers type of quarterback. He's never going to be, I don't think, in that caliber of elite, game-changing, season-defining QB, but he's a good quarterback. And he's probably going to be a good quarterback almost in any system. What's interesting is if you look at the quarterbacks that the Vikings had as options heading into free agency, Kirk Cousins, Sam Bradford, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, the 3 guys they had hitting the market, their best season in terms of PFF grading is all more or less the same. It's 85.4 for Cousins, 86.2 for Bradford, 85.3 for Keenum this past season, and 84.6 for Bridgewater back in 2014 before his injury. So Kirk Cousins doesn't represent a giant step transformation in terms of grading, but he probably is the safest of those 4 guys, whether it's injury or 1-year wonder in terms of Keenum. He probably represents the guy you're most certain will have that kind of season again in 2018. And I do think, I know you don't, but I do think that the Vikings does represent the best supporting cast he's had. Those 2 guys, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, were arguably the best receiving duo in the league this year. They both ranked in the top 6 in terms of contested catch percentage. They're going to have Dalvin Cook coming out of the backfield. Kyle Rudolph as a tight end mismatch weapon. That is a really nice receiving core for Cousins to play with. The next step for the Vikings is going to be upgrading that offensive line.
All right, so here's the thing. Let me go back to the supporting cast thing with Cousins. In 2015 and 16, I think it was at least comparable in Washington.
Okay, I'll buy that.
You'll buy comparable.
Yeah.
Deshaun Jackson is a great deep threat. Pierre Garçon, an excellent, more of a possession type of guy. Jordan Reed, one of the best mismatch weapons at tight end, and then Jamison Crowder. So those were years he put up a passer rating of 100.8 in 2015, 97.2 in 2016. That dropped down to 93.9 last year as some of his weapons moved on. But I think the point is we've seen him be elevated by a good group of receivers and a well-rounded group of receivers in the past. So it wouldn't be a stretch to expect more of the same in Minnesota, where, Thielen and Diggs and all those guys you mentioned, they are excellent. Here's the thing, though, when I compare Cousins to those other guys you're showing on your chart there, the Bradfords, the Bridgewaters, and the Keenums, those three guys, when they were in Minnesota, they were more on that conservative end of the spectrum as far as not a huge percentage of big-time throws, my favorite stat, and not a huge percentage of turnover-worthy throws. They were a little bit safer, but I think Cousins has a little bit more aggressiveness to him.
Yeah.
He's got, even a couple of years ago when I was saying he was elevated by his teammates, he still had a really high percentage of big-time throws. He's a little bit more willing to pull the trigger down the field, make more of those big opportunity attempts, and I do think that's where he'll get a little bit more out of the Thielen, the Diggs, the Rudolphs when it comes to the Vikings offense.
Yeah, he's more volatile as a passer than those guys are, and that's going to go both ways for the Vikings. It's going to cost him some games because he's going to make a key mistake at the wrong time, but it's also potentially the thing that's going to elevate that offense to winning championships. You're going to have a quarterback that can go on a run, that can do an Eli Manning 2011, elevate the rest of that team for a stretch, and make a run to the Super Bowl. I think this is a move that makes sense for both sides. Cousins maximizes that contract deal, and the Vikings are able to get a guy they obviously coveted without breaking the bank to destroy the roster to get it done.
Now, here's where I have a bit of a concern when it comes to Cousins. We already called him maybe a mid-tier quarterback. The fact that he is ranked between 9th and 19th over the last 3 years in PFF grades show that, yeah, he's pretty much a mid-tier type of guy. Now, in any given season, you can elevate that a little bit by a supporting cast. But when he was in Washington, when we charted every single throw the last couple of years, we charted how open each receiver was. 2 straight years, he led the league with the highest percentage of open receivers. Now, is that him making great decisions, or is that the scheme? And I do think the way Washington is schemed up, especially when they had Sean McVay, the new Rams head coach, when they had him in 2016, a lot of that was scheme-based with Cousins. So will he get the same opportunities in Minnesota? I think that's a big question mark. Will he have the same number of open receivers? And then his red zone work. If there is one place where he has really struggled and still managed to have those nice stats that I talked about, the red zone is where he's really struggled. Passer rating of 83.3 in 2016, 83.8 last year. That's well below the league average of 92.6. Throws far too many interceptions in the red zone. So I think that's a big question mark for Cousins because you're paying him like a Tom Brady, an Aaron Rodgers, a Drew Brees. Those guys excel in the red zone, and Cousins has really struggled.
Yeah, but the interesting thing again, though, is because this is the latest quarterback contract to get done, it's really just settling into the marketplace. And when you look at where that average lands, it's in the Jimmy Garoppolo, the Matthew Stafford, the Derek Carr range. The guys you talked about, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, those guys aren't the guys at the peak of the quarterback market, at least until Aaron Rodgers' next contract gets done.
Right.
But this didn't reset the quarterback market the way we expected it to. It didn't push that average way up into the $30 million range. The Vikings were able to mitigate that by fully guaranteeing it. So they may not have a quarterback that's the best in the league who's getting paid as the best quarterback in the league, but neither are they paying a mid-tier quarterback an unsustainable amount of money. I think this is a good deal for both sides.
All right, so we got a good deal for both sides. Kirk Cousins going to the Minnesota Vikings. I think the underlying theme here, he's a mid-tier quarterback who's capable of top 10 type of play, both statistically and from a grading standpoint. And the Minnesota Vikings go from, the NFC Championship last year, and I think they got a little bit better with the Cousins signing, and Sam likes it because it didn't strap them long-term. Kirk Cousins to the Minnesota Vikings.